Hi everyone. I started doing these notes, and about 1 minute into it, my son came in, and my 5-year-old son came in, so I have to restart. But I already filled in some of the stuff. Pythagorean theorem is just a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It's the most stereotypical formula you'll see throughout high school and onward as well. But when it comes to Pythagorean theorem, it's important to note that A and B are the two legs and C is the hypotenuse. So in every question, the first thing you're really going to do is find out which one's the hypotenuse. Because if you mess that up, you're going to get the entire question wrong. So like for here, it says find the value of x, but it doesn't say if x is a hypotenuse or a leg, right? It's just saying x. So maybe x is a hypotenuse, maybe it's a leg. Maybe x is the hypotenuse, maybe it's a leg. And depending on it, you're going to use this formula differently. So here we go. If this is the right angle, then that means these two things have to be legs, and this one has to be the hypotenuse. Because the right angle is next to the legs, and the hypotenuse is across from the right angle. At the same time with number 12, you have the right angle here. So if this is the right angle, then this has to be the legs, and this has to be the hypotenuse across from it. So now we're going to use the formula. Let's say this is A, this is B, and this is C. Once again, C has to be the hypotenuse. And now the formula, I'm just going to use it. A squared plus B squared equals C squared, where A is 10, and B is 7, and C is x, and 10 squared is 100, and 7 squared is 49, and 100 plus 49 is 149. And then in the last step, in order for the x squared to become an x, you have to square root both sides. So let me see, I need to get a calculator. There we go. So the square root of 149, it says to round it to 1 decimal, round to the nearest tenth, yes. So 12.20, the 0 just means that's going to stay at 2, so 12.2. And that's it. For the next one, this is the hypotenuse, so 21 has to be C. Other than that, you can label either of the other legs, whatever you feel like. A squared plus B squared equals C squared, where A is x, B is 19, and C is 21. I would go ahead and try to finish that up, see if you can get the right answer. Squared, 361. 21 squared is 441. Minus 361 from both sides. To solve for x, since this is adding, you have to subtract to get rid of it. So the opposite of adding is subtracting. So 441 minus 361 is 80. And now what's the last step? What's the last thing you do to get the answer? What's gonna make it happy and fun? Square rooting both sides, of course. That reminds me of a joke. It's what was crazy in the mathematician's garden. He had carrots with square roots. Okay, I'll stick to math. Take the square root of 80, 8.94. The 4 rounds down, so it's just going to be 8.9. And that's the answer. Okay, that's the first part. And the second part says state if these are a right triangle. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to do the Pythagorean theorem, and either it is going to work or it is not. It's a yes/no question. So this will be A, this will be B, and this will be C. The way I know which is because C has to be the biggest, and the other two don't matter. The hypotenuse is always the longest, so the biggest number has to be C, but after that it doesn't matter. So 10 squared plus 49.5 squared versus 50.5 squared. So we'll do this, we'll do that, and we'll just see if it's equal. Let me zoom a little bit. All right, 10 squared plus 49.5 squared is this thingy, and 50.5 squared is not quite that, right? Almost, but not really. Of course, I'm going to put both of these on my piece of paper because I'm a really, really good student who likes to show my work so that just in case I get it wrong, Mr. Anderson can see my work and give me partial credit or give me really good feedback saying, oh, see, you got everything right. It's just you didn't notice that those two things were a little bit different, but you did all the work right, so I'll give you some points. Versus just writing this and then saying yes or no, then you wouldn't get as many points. Because you need to show your work. Yeah. Next up, we'll try this one as well. Or you should try it. You really should. See if it's a yes or a no. I didn't write it here. The answer is no. Boop. Let's see, 15 has to be C because it's the longest. So we'll have 9 squared plus 12 squared equals 15 squared maybe. So 9 squared plus 12 squared versus 15 squared. So it looks like 9 squared plus 12 squared is the 225. The 15 squared is also 225, which means yes, it is a right triangle. There you go. So it's just seeing if the Pythagorean theorem works. Does Pythagorean theorem work? That's how you do this section. Just see if the Pythagorean theorem works. All right, distance formula. This one is a longer formula. And it's like this. It has a big old square root. And we'll have x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. It's very similar to Pythagorean theorem in that they're both squared, you know, a squared plus b squared. And at the end, you would have to square root it. So it's very similar to that. But that's the distance formula. And it says to find the distance between each pair of points. So this is x1, y1, x2, y2. And we're going to be plugging that into the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. All right, plug and chug. First up, let's just get this out of the way. All right, so that's the parts of the formula that is not numbers, the square root, the parentheses, square plus stuff. All I'm going to be doing now is taking the x values, putting them here, taking the y values, and plugging them in there. So x2 is 3. x1 is -4. y2 is -7. y1 is 6. Like so. So if you want to simplify it by hand, you would say 3 minus -4 is the same thing as a 3 plus 4, which is 7. And then a negative 7 minus 6 is a negative 13. Like that. And then 7 squared is 49. Negative 13 squared. Remember that anything squared is always positive because squaring means to multiply by itself. So a negative 13 times a negative 13 is a positive 169. But you can always do it in your calculator as well. Negative 13 squared. It'll be 169. Just note that if you don't put the parentheses, then it's not going to give you the right answer. That's because of PEMDAS. Parentheses come before exponents. So you do have to keep those parentheses that were right here all the way down. So 169 plus 49 is 218. And we'll square root that to get 14.8. 7, 6, so the 6 rounds the 7 up to an 8, 14.8. So approximately 14.8. Boom. Next up, if you want to give it a shot, and then you can pause it. Here we go. So square root. I'll just put down that part from the formula. And then this is x1, y1, x2, y2, and I'll plug it in from the formula up here. So first is x2. Then is x1, then y2, and then y1. Just be careful to keep the negatives when you bring it down, because otherwise you might get it wrong. This one I'm going to do super cheap and just do the whole thing. Square root, parenthesis, 2 minus negative 6 parentheses squared plus parentheses 0 minus negative 5 parentheses square. I think that's everything. I'll double check. 0 minus negative 5 squared, the 2 minus the negative squared, the whole thing is square rooted, and there's a plus sign in the middle. Okay, there we go. So 9.43. The 3 rounds down, so it's 9.4. And there you go. I could, of course, if I felt like it, say that this is 8 squared plus 5 squared because of math, which is 64 plus 25. And the square root of that is, sure enough, the exact same answer. So, yep, there you go. Lastly, this one on a graph, I just use Pythagorean theorem. So I'm going to make a right triangle. This is the right angle, and I'm just going to count. And you know, this will be A, this will be B, and this will be C. And we're just finding C, the distance between the 2 points. But you can just count this. Instead of doing the whole x2 minus 1, x3, 17, I don't know. Instead of doing the whole formula, you can just count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So Pythagorean theorem would just have 8 squared plus 9 squared equals c squared, right? No formula needed, just like that. Boop. Just keep in mind the distance is always the hypotenuse, so it'll always just be this. So that's 64 plus 81. which is, let's see, 40, 40, 100, 45. And then you can square root both sides. And I'm paranoid, so 64 plus 81, in fact, what's that? So you'll get 12.04, which is hard because I've been saying to round to the nearest tenth, but this would round down to a 0, so you would get 12.0. So it's approximately 12.0. So like, even if I'm saying round to the tenth, if you put that, I will count it correct. But if you're like, but it's not 12 kind of thing, I'd be like, yeah, you're right. If you want to put 12.04, I'm not going to mark that wrong. Just because it is more than 12. And if you write 12, it might be misleading. So I would accept any of these three answers. This one's technically the most correct, though. But if I said tenths place, that would be correct. And if you're writing 12, I'm not going to take points off. But okay, that's it. I don't think there's back to this thing, so woo! Hopefully that makes sense. If not, you know, you can go back, rewatch, pause at times. And that's about it. So have a great one. Thanks for watching. Peace.